We're going to get started. I think for this one, I ran out of cool prayer, so we're just going to stick with the serenity prayer for this one. All right, if we can take a moment of silence for the still sick and suffering inside and outside of these rooms, and especially for their families. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God's will, not ours, be done. All right, and I've asked a friend to come up and read a little bit before we get started.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ty. I'm an alcoholic.
It's Ty.
Step 6 and 7. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real hope to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. Thanks for letting me read.
Thanks for reading, Ty. All right, and without further ado, please help me welcome our next speaker, a good friend of ours, Karen C.
All right, so I'm just going to sticky note. Hey everyone, my name's Karen. I'm an alcoholic. Also to be here, thank you for putting this on. It's also incredibly humbling to be invited anywhere, because my story will tell you that I didn't used to be invited everywhere, so thank you so much for having me and for going to all this work. I know it's like putting on an event. It can be challenging, and definitely will go in step 6 and 7 issues to work through. Okay, I have a sobriety date. It's September 6, 1989. I have a home group. I have a sponsor women, and I loved the way Claire put that about explaining being in the center of Alcoholics Anonymous and staying there. So my story is not like a lot of the speakers who've been before me, and I thank all of you who have set this amazing stage to go over step 6 and 7 with y'all. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and stayed sober on September 6, 1989. And I came in and got plopped into a pocket of enthusiasm in Morris County, New Jersey, where I got sober. And these women were studying the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So Chris and I have had many conversations about this. I am 3 months more sober than him, so I'm just saying. So I keep telling him that he'll be like this in 3 more months. So, and fortunately, we've had the great fortune of being friends most of this time. And we were ending up at a certain period in the early 90s of studying the book in 3 different areas in North Jersey. And Judy joined that, and there are 4 places where the book was really being studied, and we've all been friends in that area. But I got plopped into, thank God for God, into a group of women who were studying the big book with the Joe and Charlie tapes. And alongside that was a 12 and 12, because that was the deal of the time. And I have not lost my enthusiasm for recovery, thank God. I came to you an absolute disaster. We talk about brokenness and separation from and all of that, and I can just tell you that my alcoholic thinking just ran totally parallel to the truth. And I thought it was the truth. So the conflict that occurred, I was always doing the defense, just trying to be better than or greater than or prettier than or something more than, because I had what we have here, like I think we all are, sort of like unresolved mystics, trying to figure out what is causing this disconnect. Why don't I think I can fit in when the accolades and all of the rest of the stuff say I am, but I'm not. I'm not feeling some kind of way. And I had no idea that was alcoholism. I had no idea that I was disconnected from the power internally to be okay and completely at ease in my skin externally. I didn't know that was my deal. And, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I would swear to you that my drinking was really okay. It was my life was crazy, and I knew I drank too much, but I had no idea about all of the things behind it. I didn't understand that threefold disease, and the speakers that were speaking before set up the whole stage of all of these reasons why. And okay, so if I pick up a drink, the drink takes me. Okay, okay. But I didn't see it, and I really didn't see it until I got into those inventories. I really didn't see the depth and weight of my troubles until I got into the inventories. So what happened for me was I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, certain set of circumstances. The obsession to drink was lifted, and I haven't had a drink since. And I found a group of people who took me and put me immediately in this book. So my sobriety is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I haven't deviated too far from that. And I can tell you that the character defect list applied to me in many, many ways. And I don't know if I was ever a big book thumper, but I definitely would try to tell you what to do. And I still have a problem with that. But anyway, so as time went on, though, and I'm here to talk about 6 and 7, I really appreciated Jimmy's discussion on step 3. Because step 3 was a total setup for me to even have the desire to look at the truth. Because in there, it asked me a position. Can I possibly seek and believe in something that will work for me? Step 2 says to me, well, would you consider there might be a solution for you somewhere out there other than the one you're running on? Now, I knew I was in a jackpot of problems. I knew I had a whole lot of financial, emotional, not so much physical, troubles to straighten out. My husband had walked out 4 times. I knew that. I had been faced with IRS knocking at the door. I had 3 children my precious cargo, that were terrified of me. I had absolutely, and somehow knew every once in a while the clues. I knew that I had really become what I never wanted to be, which was a drunk mom. And I had all the reasons, kind of like what Cleo was talking about, why I felt the way I felt. And stood in that defense, held on to that post. That these were the reasons why my life was like this. But beneath all of that was this idea that I could figure it out. I'm smart enough. I got the chords. I got the accolades. I got the awards. It was the idea that somehow, some way, I can figure it out. And Jimmy smashed that when he was talking about step 3, that I needed a different kind of power. I needed to be able to find something within that I could seek would work for this internal condition. Those weren't the words you used, Jimmy, but that was the idea. That's what I heard in all of that. So I had the sponsor, and she was a school teacher, had no children, so she never understood when I had to say, but I got to get a babysitter, and she would just stare, the sponsor stare. And I would show up anyway. And we got to this 4-step, writing that 4-step, and I couldn't get, my thoughts were so scattered for quite a while. I'd say a good 3 years at AA. Well, they're still kind of scattered, to tell the truth. But they weren't really making sense. You know what I mean? I'd have an idea, I'd try to support the idea. The conclusion wouldn't match the idea. I'm sure you know what I'm saying. And little by slowly, though, life was straightening out because I wasn't drinking. And I was doing all the things you told me to do. All of the things. I even wore that greeter banner at the convention and stood by the door, terrified, shaking your hand. I even did that stuff. I did the stuff you said you got to go do. Call that newcomer. Oh, all right, maybe. And 2 days would go by, and I'd eventually call her. I had I had trouble coming out of my shell. I had trouble coming out of the isolation alcoholism put you in. I had trouble coming out being vulnerable to you. I had trouble coming, I just couldn't see it. But I didn't want to drink. And I was desperate enough in that whole thing to just go, okay, 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 and try not to criticize my okay mind. So as we did that 4-step, and I go there for a moment, as we did that 4-step, and I started to write down the things, and I didn't do it in the list. I was incapable of following directions. Claire said it this morning. I wasn't a really good direction follower. I kind of would make the rules accommodate what I thought about them. You know, living in the gray, we might call it. I don't know. So I couldn't follow the directions that they wanted me on those lists. I couldn't. And so she said, just write. So we sat up in the Torn. It's this park up in Morris County. And we sat there on a blanket, and I read her the story, the best I could about the resentments I could touch at the time, the level of fear, which she politely told me was my selfish and self-centered nature, and you know, my conduct up until what I could possibly admit that first go around. And she translated it into the columns. She helped me move it over. She helped describe to me the motive under the motive, where I was selfish, where I was frightened, where I was inconsiderate, where I was dishonest. She helped me identify that. I couldn't see it until she took the time to do that. And I thank her to the day I died with that. You know, that she clarified for me this motive that was my life. You know, that I had the defense of the post, that if I let go of that post, you might hurt me. I might be living back where I was. I grew up in Wisconsin. Both my parents were drunks, untreated alcoholics. They both died since then. My dad married my mom's best friend. You know, it's an alcoholic story. You know, and left to fend for whatever. You know, same kind of thing. I'm marrying Mr. Wonderful. And we proceed to snuff the life out of each other. And we create a lot of chaos. Not intentionally. None of it was intentionally. And that's what was always so confusing. I didn't intentionally go up to blow up your life. I didn't intentionally go up to blow up my financial life. I didn't intentionally mean to do any of this. But my alcoholic thinking, setting aside the drink, took over. And that alcoholic thinking demanded that I get satisfied first, right? And I'm here in Alcoholics Anonymous going through the deal and trying to do everything I can do. And I discover at 13 years sober that I haven't told the whole truth, nothing but the truth, because I wanted to drink. And I didn't even realize the depth of the secret that happened. And when I was 13 years, I thank God that day there was no alcohol in my house, and that I was in the middle of the deal, and that I had friends around me, and I had a network around me, and I had a sponsor. I'll tell you what I was really grateful for. I had a home group, a sponsor. I went to the 4 same meetings, minimum a week, which I did all the time, and they knew something was wrong with me. And if there's any reason not to have that, it was that reason, because that saved me, because I had to go to a meeting. And at that meeting, there was a speaker. And at that speaker meeting, I heard for the first time the depth and weight of what 6 and 7 could transform my soul into being the exact person that I was just trying to be, and I couldn't find it. Obscured by a secret. This is what the speaker said. And I was like, do I have a secret? It's like, oh my God. And out came more of the onion, got peeled, right? And I was finally able to sit down, and I'll share with you, in the time we have together, the defense removal, the desire to be able to parallel that to a trade-in. That's what my sponsor referred it to. You can trade in a defect, a character, she called them defenses, with the spiritual principle. And I was clueless as to what she meant until we sat down and truly looked at this. Am I entirely ready to have God remove my defects of character? First of all I heard was I was a defective character, and I knew that already. I didn't realize that's not what it was saying. It was saying this very basic principle that I'm a child of God just like you or I. barely afflicted with untreated alcoholism, taken care of. I hadn't had a drink in a while, and I'm doing the deal, and I was suffering from what I've come to understand was spiritual bypass, not drinking and just pretending. But I'm not realizing the depth of the pretending, right? I didn't know. So step 6 became for me a spiritual state of mind, right? So the awareness, and it's a sacred awareness that came from the truthful telling of what was really going on with the resentments that I had, the disappointment. And I didn't look at them as resentments until she said this. Well, how about disappointments? I went, oh my God, here's the list. You know, you didn't measure up to the script, right? So I'm disappointed, I'm frustrated, I'm feeling like I have no way out. I am cornered into trying to see this from a totally different perspective, right? So that suddenly came from me from the inside out, and this awareness that, wait a minute, maybe I'm not looking at it from the right perspective. Maybe he's pissed off at me and my ex. maybe something really did happen from a totally different perspective. And we started to look at that from a totally different perspective. And, you know, she threw out the regular words like arrogant, grandiose, not compassionate. And then she said, well, and we were paralleling it with him, with that ex-husband thing going on, because I just got the second IRS letter, and it was the night before my son's second kidney transplant, and he kept bailing on all of this, and I couldn't believe they were after me for another $12,000 after I just finished paying $250,000. You know, that's the anger. That's the anger that was going to drive me to a drink that night. So change has had a lot to do with not an avoidance. I was welcome. I mean, I thought my head was saying, we're welcoming for change. And I said I was, but internally was what Peter has always told me, meet resistance with no resistance, and I couldn't do it in this area. He actually called me out on it. We were somewhere, I saw him, I was talking, he said, resistance. Meet resistance with no resistance. Do you have resistance? Yeah. He said, well, you got to dig down deep. And some of this stuff is a digging down deep thing. At the same time, I had this incredible experience with a commitment. You know, because we do that. I'm a service person. And I don't do a lot of service like the level that Jimmy and some of the other people in this room do in those areas. I've done them, but I do service in the home group. I do service with women, do a whole lot of that stuff. But I'm always doing something. So the service commitment, that time was a 6-month commitment about picking up these women from this shelter and bringing them to the step meeting at my home group. And the guy got the guys, and I got the women, and we'd get this bus, and this guy's name was Paul that I was riding with, and we were doing this deal every Wednesday. And so we were picking up these women, and this woman was there, and she gets in, and she was a freaking mess. And I saw her years ago, earlier in AA. And I'm like, what's going on? She's now in a homeless shelter. And she's telling me her story in the homeless shelter and what had happened, and she's lost everything. She used to live in Bernardsville, big house, big man, big job, big everything, and lost everything because of drinking. And I asked her, I said, did you go through the steps? Do you have a sponsor? She said, yep. And something had me ask her this. Did you ever work through 6 and 7? She said, never. I started to think about it. I started to think about my depth and weight of those 2 steps in my life, and have they really become part of the design for living that is needed for me to pursue my recovery, treat my alcoholism, and be able to live in 10 and 11. Have I been able to do that? I mean, step 3 is a very powerful place. I mean, it gives us the opportunity in that prayer, right, to take a real good look at what's going on. You know, it asks me to look at the bondage of self, to be relieved of my difficulties. What are my difficulties? There are many. You know, and so we started to apply that prayer to the difficulties of the day. And as it moved forward, I really began to see how my perception of my formula was really inaccurate. I had me. I might as well have had a new name, Mimi. got rearranged. It got rearranged. So we pick her up. I tell her, listen, how about I come by tomorrow? Thursday was a good day for me. And we'll sit and we'll go through it. And I went to go see her. And she committed suicide that night. And it taught me the gravest lesson. And you learn it through other people dying or through a disaster that happens in your own life. I started to think about, well, where is this in my life? And I really started to look at, well, what is the problem that I am unable or unwilling or resisting is the proper word, to really look at my reactions and my instincts in life, and why is my defense popping up like this? What am I defending? I'm told truth needs no defense here, but I have tons of it. I'm afraid you're going to not like me, or I'm afraid you're going to kick me out, or I'm afraid I'm not going to have enough money to pay my bills. That was, I'm on my own, don't you know? I mean, lots of reasons, right? And change, a hot air balloon goes up, right, with all of these thoughts that are not even based in truth. And I was paralleling the life I came here with my delusional living with the truth of what actually was. And what step 4 set in motion for me when I was 13 years sober and had a different sponsor, going through this, what set in motion was exactly my perception of the truth was not the truth. My perception, did you ever consider this is what was going on for them? Kind of like the story that Cleo was just telling about her mom. My sponsor at the time, she said to me, well, what was your mom's life like? And I told her, and then what was your dad's life like? Told her, and she said, and you're wondering why you're confused. You're wondering why you're feeling you're not on solid ground. Like, all those things are true, but it gives you absolutely no reason to be the bitch on wheel. It gives you no reason to treat other people lesser than. It gives you absolutely no reason to lie, cheat, steal in your mind, and somewhat in action, and steal from those kids of yours that you claim you care so much about. I learned love is unpredictable in my growing up. I learned everything was on a condition. And you guys are telling me that's not what life is. But that's my experience. That's the people I surrounded myself with, and that's the life I came here with. So I had to, if I put down my guard and be vulnerable and tell you what I'm thinking, I don't want to be kicked out. I don't want to be told I'm not good enough for this room. And little do I know, A doesn't do that, but I have this idea it does. So the denial, my character defects, my instincts in collision. Chris and I had a wonderful experience many years ago about the study of the instincts in collision. And I remember him talking about this idea that, when my emotional security is threatened, I am going to behave in some kind of way, recovered or not. It's up to me to recognize that reaction and catch it before it goes into resentment, a fear, or harm's done. It's my job to recognize that, to be awake and aware to do that. So denial that I have that, or delusion that it doesn't exist for me, keeps me in this confusion of really sitting down to do that trading in with the God that, do I trust him? Have I come to the point in my belief of the higher power that this God or this higher power has my back, and although it doesn't look like it, like, I'm dyslexic and I would love to read everything the correct way, and oftentimes I don't. If I just twist it around, maybe I'll feel okay about that. That's what I was like then. And I started to do that very analysis, right? To take these character defenses that were prevalent in the situation, take my ex-husband with him, and I began to see, where I had invoked jealousy, where I had put him in a position of self-defense, where I had questioned, he was the kind of guy that was needy, and he should drive me crazy. And I would just play with that, like, get a grip. And I was not understanding of his needs. And I began to see how those relations, how that was a threat of relationship, it was a defense. Like, if I rely on you too much, you're leaving anyway, so why bother? So these underlying motives started to surface up. And I began to develop this new thing called compassion for these people that I thought needed to get a grip. I started to develop a level of patience and understanding that was evident in my ability to now hear you. With those defenses on the post and wrapped myself so tight, there was no way I was going to be able to pay attention to you before my thinking stepped in to criticize it, to judge it, to undermine it, and not constructively heal both of us. So these character defects and my instincts, hand in hand, created an atmosphere where people just didn't want to be with me. And I couldn't understand that. I'm a good person, right? I wasn't trusting though, spiritually trusting. So it became the sacred awareness inside my soul that suddenly is from inside out. It's not from outside in. And I had a job to do here. I have a job. I have a good friend in, I was doing some work in AA history, and I was working with Deb and Gail on a project. And they were talking about this inside-out deal and how character defenses prevent you from participating. How about that? I never had looked at it like that. So there becomes a very prayerful life in this, like, God, please remove my fear, whatever it might be, and that fear prayer can be used right here. My fear of what? My fear that if I tell you the truth of what I am really thinking, that you'll actually listen to me. I mean, what I'm thinking might be totally off base, but here in Alcoholics Anonymous, with your trusted circle, to be able to say what you're thinking and get some feedback. Yeah, you're right. That is pretty crazy. Instead of my fear, which is probably what they'll do, instead of my fear that I'm going to be kicked out of Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that, or told to go elsewhere. Because sometimes stuff happens, right? Where left field comes in and you do become you are the result of somebody else's decision, a consequence. That does happen. But we have a skill here. It's called God, and it's called prayer, and it's called take the truth to someone you can help sort that through so you're not living in a resentment, because we cannot afford a resentment, an uncomfortability, a disappointment to truly rule your life. You can't afford it. We just can't afford it. Life is just way too short. So there, in the 12 and 12, and I know this is a big book, but in the 12 and 12, it talks about obeying spiritual principles first because I had to, rolls into because I like how I feel. And that's kind of like what happened to me. So 6 and 7 kind of rolled in together, and when I could feel myself getting some kind of way, that could be a number of things, by the way, feel in some kind of way, whether it's I'm terrified of moving, or I'm not going to be able to pay the rent increase, or how am I going to take care of this bill? Do I believe that this power greater than myself will give me the opportunity to take care of this in some kind of way? And I can tell you from a current experience I'll share in a minute, that I can thank God for removing the fear of my decisions being primary truth. That I've been granted the opportunity to see things from a totally different angle with the help of my sponsors, particularly. I have to become willing to do that. Spoke about it earlier, that willingness is indispensable. It's beyond that. If I am not willing, I have no desire to see the truth about a subject. I have no desire to step aside. I have no desire to humbly say, I was wrong. And what can we do to make it right? I have absolutely no desire to take care of objectionable characteristics that were brought to my attention in the 5th step. And at the bottom of the 5th step, after we take that hour and we look at that inventory, and I really like inventory, what it does to my soul and the people in my life. And it's like, write it down, let's talk about it. It can be a very quick inventory, or it might be on a whole issue, who the heck knows? Who knows what God has in store for us today, right? But I need to be in touch with that stuff, because my alcoholic mind, which I will always have, is going to say something like this: don't pay attention. and I'll just dismiss that. I thank God for step 10, but I'll just dismiss it during the course of the day. So my alcoholic mind is ridiculous. I don't want to drink again. Much more importantly, I don't want the dissension that I came here with every living human being. I don't want to live like that. So I had a page 52, Alive and Well, a couple of times in my sobriety. And they started with personal relationships. My personal relationships weren't going the way I wanted to. And at the root of every single time was this description of, you aren't doing my script. So I began to understand how powerful that my judgments control me, that my judgments imprison me, that I am the sum total of all of my decisions right here, right now. That right here, right now, if something is going on and I can't speak my truth, or I don't know how to come approach you, or you're feeling I'm unapproachable, which I've been mightily accused of many times. Generally, I understand that I have a huge spiritual energy, and I'm responsible for that. I'm responsible for keeping that clean and clear with the power greater than myself. So we take that list and we start to trade in a different point of view. And it's not as simple. It wasn't as simple as, oh God, please help me not be impatient, because, oh my God, I'll get lots of lessons in that. Instead, it's, dear God, please help me be compassionate and kind to the next person. And little by little, that became much more my style. You know, I could feel myself feeling some kind of way because I was reacting with the post, because the post never seems to go away, it just gets caged in a little bit. I was reacting to situations, and I have to learn a whole new point of view. So COVID, I'm going to talk about that for a second. So COVID comes along, and I'm living in North Jersey, and I have a beautiful townhouse. It's great. I've got a really big job. Everything's, and we're shut down. Now, I'm a single woman. I live by myself, but I have a big life outside of that. And the way North Jersey was a little bit more strict than down here for some reason, I don't know, but it was. And I couldn't see my kids, couldn't do my job. Everything became online. AA became online. People came online. You went outside, you were wearing a mask across the street, didn't say hello, you didn't see any people. And from March to May, I started to feel internally that I was losing it. I didn't have any connection. One of the most powerful recovery sources I ever had is being able to be with the energy of Alcoholics Anonymous in person. In my very first meeting that I walked into, from that time that greeter shook my hand, and I went into that room, I could feel it. I could feel being safe and protected in that room, no matter how I came, or no matter how you came. You know, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with that, but I had that feeling. And I knew that the energy of you, and looking you in the eye, and the description of Evie, and Bill, when he sees it, he knew he had internally transformed, that there was a change within him. And I could see it, and not everybody in those meetings, but many people in those meetings. And I wanted that internal reorganization. And I did not realize the key to that was 6 and 7. With the very powerful third step prayer they move us into, the affirmation that I made this enormous decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of something I don't understand, but you apparently do. I'm a Catholic girl. I go to church. I believe in all that stuff, but I didn't have the relationship you're all talking about, or the trust that it could happen for me. So it was a consideration of that decision, and maybe that was a holdout until I was 13 years sober. I don't know. But it spread up to this became one of the most important reviews that I ever did. I couldn't believe it when I wrote down those character defects that I currently experienced when I was 13 years sober, and moved them into a parallel spiritual principle that I could practice. It wasn't just an exercise of seeing how awful I was, because I already knew that. It was the opportunity to have this transformation that they talk about, to have this heart flip, to have an open mind, to feel healed inside, to do what I read about the unresolved mystic seeking this God or this whatever hole in the soul thing could possibly be. So I needed to get to root and branch. I needed to find out the motive under the motive. And all of them were not true. The motives under the motive. The experiences I had, my lack of an ability to pay attention to the red flag because I really wanted this over here. I hung out way too long in situations that I should have been able, I said to myself, I should, and don't ever say that, that's the 13th commandment, we're not allowed to say that. That I should have been able, I gave myself a rule, I should have been able to move from, I was incapable of moving because of old ideas. And that, Jimmy, thank you for saying that, that line that we brought up, I talk about it all the time, and how it works, is nil until we let go absolutely. How can I let go of something I don't understand, or I don't even know is operative, until I do this, right? So I began to really pay attention to my thinking as we're doing this trade-in of a defense for a spiritual principle. And my sponsor asked some really awesome questions, and she went back to, so what do you think about what a spiritual principle is? And because that was always something that's stumbling, like we throw out words here, but do we understand what those words mean? Well, to me, it goes back to that comment in the fear part of our book, and it says, do you trust infinite God or finite self? Well, infinite to me is permanent. It's what it is. There is no gray area in honesty, for instance. Karen, you're either honest or you're not. Where are you on that? You know, I might be on a little dishonest. She said, you're still dishonest. You're still dishonest. You know, and compassionate. You're either compassionate of heart or you're judgy as hell. Right? You know, one or the other. I'm either generous of spirit or I'm not. I'm holding back because I'm looking for something from you. And each one of them, as we went through them, had an underlying motive of the motive. I was looking for something from you, to provide something for me. Now, spiritual principles didn't have that effect. A spiritual principle, when I practice generosity, for example, because I have it and it's God's money anyway, I just need to be a good steward, it creates more money. Go figure. That deal of I owed the IRS $250,000, well, it was $500, got down to $250. I just had this job that I just made these enormous commission checks to pay it off. And one thing after another, bringing me back to what happened in COVID, the fear was, I don't think I can do this on my own. To move out of the area where I felt secure, to know that I could leave an area and move down to the beach. And it kept coming back, well, where can you breathe? And it was, I can breathe at the beach. I can't breathe here. I was feeling so constricted. And I ended up in the emergency room having panic attacks that I haven't had since early sobriety. I'm 33 years sober. And the underlying fear was that I couldn't do it. I'm like, that isn't even true. When you look at what's the truth, but it comes up, your alcoholic mind comes up. Compounding, I'm just seeing people on Zoom, and I'm not seeing you, I'm not interrelating with you, I'm not listening to your story. I am on Zoom, but not in person, right? And so little by slowly, I made that change, and I ended up making a decision. I work halfway between Asbury Park and where I live, and I decided, what was on the other side of the bridge? So I went on the other side of the bridge, and that day I rented a house for a winter rental, just to see if I liked it. And the house was a dive bomb, but I put my entire life in storage. Actually, I had 2 storage units. I put it in storage, and I just started to breathe. And I found that like 8 months later, I wasn't holding my breath. And underneath that came a whole lot of story that I hadn't been ready to go underneath with. But it was because of this. It was because of the stability created by living spiritual principles the best I could. And when I fell short, as it mentions you might, I didn't drink, I went to God and I went to you. And I continued to do that. We're not perfect people. We've got an alcoholic mind. Do not think that it doesn't show up, because it does. And if you get involved in Alcoholics Anonymous on any level other than just a meeting maker, you're going to be challenged with showing up right. You're going to be challenged with holding your ground and standing in truth. And you're going to be asked, well, what do you really think about that? And sometimes it's just like, and out the door you go. And sometimes it's like, you know what, I don't know, let's get back to that. So am I choosing peaceful rather than rightful? That was a big job for me to do. Could I abandon my limited box thinking for what you're telling me? 6 and 7 allowed me that freedom. I'm promised freedom at the end of step 5, that I get to walk free. I'm promised that. I get to walk free, but it goes on, there's more work. And there's just a short little paragraph about this step 6. Am I entirely ready? And I thought I was. But let me tell you, I had a lot of reservations I didn't know were real. And they came up in experiences. And it was because of working with others that they would come up, and I'd go, why am I feeling some kind of way? I don't want that balloon of a life again. So what happened was an ability to come down here. And then my sponsor says to me, when I found a permanent place to live that only God found for me, I don't know how permanent it is. It's on a lease, so you know what's going to happen. Who knows where I'll end up next? Right? She said, you got to go empty those storage units. And this was 6 and 7 in total action, let me tell you. In the first storage unit, when my husband left me, and I lost the house, and all the rest of that stuff, I just packed up my married life in boxes, and I put it in the storage unit. I asked my kids, I have 3 kids, if they wanted anything, and they just roll their eyes at me most of the time anyway. So I put it in the back of the storage unit, and I was paying a monthly fee. You know how expensive storage units are? It starts out at 1, and I got to tell you that 10 years later, it's 3 times as much as it was when I first put them in that thing. But I never dealt with it. You know what? I was harboring memories and keeping them alive. You know how it says in our book that we harbor resentments? We also harbor memories. We really do. So, she said to me, she said, you need to get So 2 vans, big vans, arrive in my driveway, emptying those storage units. And she told me I had to walk through every box by myself and deal with what was in the contents in it. Now, in my married life, I had 3 stillborn babies. In my married life, there was a lot of tragedy that happened, and I kept all those memories right in those boxes. I hadn't wrestled with forgiveness. I hadn't gotten to that. I somehow, at the end of the day, for whatever reason, held myself accountable for the way you acted and I received, or the consequence that happened. Somehow in there was the vestiges of an old idea that I was responsible. And when I finished emptying this stuff, I went down to a marina right in Atlantic Highlands. I went to this marina. I think Jimmy told me about it. He used to fish there. So I went. She said, you need to go. We did some work, and she said, just go someplace that you think. And so I went there. And I started to think, I was just watching the boats, and I was trying to think of what a marina does. So my marina of memories was keeping a lot of this stuff alive. And as I had revealed it to her, which I've never told anybody a lot of this, and as I felt myself literally rise in spirit. And felt that healing. Because great suffering and great love are my disciplinarians. The great love that power greater than myself showed me through the voices of you, through my home group, through my friends, through my network, through my sponsors, through all of you, through my children. All of it brought me to the place that I don't need anything else. And was able to release that and feel, in a way, the willingness to let go of those old ideas and the exercise of seeing what I did to hold on to them, the characteristic defense, my post-contain. I was chained to it. And the release that came from the practice of trying something different. I couldn't. I couldn't even tell you, put into words, what asking for the freedom of the bondage of self, now I understand what it means. That I could humbly ask this power to remove the shortcoming of me falling short from my chosen ideal. And that's how I look at this. My defects are my behavior. My shortcoming is I'm falling short from how I want to be. So I was falling way short in certain areas. And what kept me apart from it was a arrogant behavior that I thought I could deal with this. I thought I knew. I thought it was my job to figure it out, right? So then I could take this into the 7-step prayer. And into the 7-step prayer went so much of this anxiety, where I could turn it around. And I use the 7-step prayer just like this today, where if I'm struggling with something, and I just had something happen recently, and it was like the craziest thing, I sign a lease, they send me a letter, they want to increase my rent 12%. That's a lot of money. And I called and I said, but I'm looking at my lease and I'm locked in here. So why am I getting this letter? But it took me a sleepless night to have the courage to call and ask the question. And I still do that because I am not necessarily courageous and humble in the same thought. You know what I'm saying? I'm not necessarily that because this is not how I've led my life. So courageous and humble don't necessarily go hand in hand without some thoughtful prayer life with my God. And I have a practice. I have a daily, letter to God thing that I do with all of that. So I need to back off on my old ideas when I'm feeling some kind of way, and give that thoughtfulness and commitment to these are the things that are important to me, and we all have our own journey, to being honest, to being courageous in my truth, whatever it is, and to be humble in my approach to realize you also have a script, you also have a point of view. So delivery is everything, and about being able to move forward in my life. So I'm never stuck in that marina of memories keeping me from moving forward. We do have a job to do here. Okay, I can't necessarily define it always. I do have a job, and it is helping you, and you are helping me. That is part of it. There are other things that are daily revealed as to how I show up. My job is about helping others. My job is to clarify the language of insurances. Okay, that is my world. To be able to help somebody walk through all that crazy, crazy stuff. My job is to help others. All of our position is to help others. And we have a great call to service. As Chris was mentioning, and in A Vision for You, it outlines what will find you here. We're here to help you move. Help you move. Do you believe God before you, God behind you, God beside you helps you move? Do you believe that? Or don't you? Because if you don't, you'll end up with holding on to the post of defense, unable to release it for the freedom of the spiritual principle. So when I say that prayer, where I humbly ask God, as I understand my God, right, to do with me as he would, I place you myself unreservedly in your care, particularly with this issue, because I was afraid to call this property management company. Okay, I admit I'm nothing without you. I am. What I am when I come to you is not the woman who stands here today. I'm not that. And I go back to that picture of that first day, of the trauma I felt and the brokenness within me, unable to even utter a word. It took 7 months before I could put a sentence together. My drinking was out of control, and I knew that, and let alone the dry goods, all of it. But I had to do something for relief, right? So we move forward in this prayer that we have in our book, right? So I should have all of me, good and bad. And I was like, okay, the good and bad of me. And I look at that and I said, this defense is taking its toll, right? So I pray that you move for me every single defective character. And what was playing on me was that I'm not going to be able to afford this. And I don't believe that I'll be able, believe me, I make a really nice income. I don't even know what I'm thinking sometimes. I can't, but the truth is I go back to the days I didn't. The truth is, I go back to the days of lying, cheating, scamming, stealing, manipulating you. The truth is, when I'm presented with something like that, that's where I go. Is that the truth of the moment? No. Is that the truth of reality? No. Is that the truth of my bank account today? No. There's none of that. But I'll go there, and it will be my truth of the moment. So I'll ask God to bring me to the truth. What's the truth? And that's exactly how it has to work. So I take this 7-step prayer with the power that 3rd-step prayer put us into here. That I'm looking to seek and find what is going on with my thinking. What am I afraid of right here? And it's more or less, what am I thinking and what are the fears that are popping up? I don't analyze them. I just know that they're there. And the job I have to do is not let them go through that little bit of time of awareness, being awake and aware to it, so it doesn't turn into the resentment, the fear, or harm's done to somebody else. I don't want to make any more 4-step amends. I don't want to make any more 9-step amends. I don't want to make any more amends, period. Okay, so it stands in my way, right? I ask him to remove every single defect of character, the belief that I still don't think I'm good enough, the inability to believe that I'll have enough. Please, God, give me the ability to know I'm good enough, that it will be okay. Fill me with your strength. So that's what I do when I'm given this opportunity, and this humbly asking God brings me to that article that Bill wrote in his book about humility. And I'll close with this, because we didn't open with the prayer. I think we'll close with one. And this little book, I don't know if that's the Bill. I carry this in my car. There's a couple of pieces of literature I always have in my car. I'm a salesperson, so I'm on the road now a lot. It's awesome. I'm back on the road. We love it, to be back on the road, to be able to visiting and seeing people. But I often get challenged with a phone call or with my broker base or something like that. So I have literature in my car. I've always had literature in my car. So this is always in my car, but I just happen to really love this. And it opens to this page, so I read it a lot. When I meditate upon a vision, right, to do the will of God is the vision. When I meditate upon that, this is what Bill says, I'll need not be dismayed because I'll never attain it, nor need I swell with presumption that one of these days its virtue shall be mine. In other words, I always need God. I only need to dwell on the vision itself, letting it grow and evermore fill my heart. This done, I can compare it with my last taken personal inventory. Then I get a sane and healthy idea of where I actually stand on the highway to humility. I see that my journey towards God has scarcely begun. And as thus I get down to my right size and stature, my self-concern and importance become amusing. It's so true. Then faith grows that I do have a place on this highway, and that I can advance upon it with deepening peace and confidence. Once more, I know that God is good, and that I need fear no evil, and that this is a great gift, this knowledge, and that I have a destiny. And my destiny is in God, and my destiny is in good. Right? So as I continue to contemplate God's perfection, I'll discover still another job. As a child, healing my first symphony, I was lifted up into indescribable harmony, although I knew little of how or whence it came. So today, when I listen for God's music of the spheres, I can now and again hear those divine chords by which I am told the great composer loves me and that I love him. And with working on this very important lifetime job, you'll get to feel that way too. So thanks for letting me share.